We lost one of our family this year in Edster. That was a panel in Webmaster World. And my first PubCon in 2005, I was lost, he took time out. He could see I was brand new. He sat down with me and told me how I should get the most out of PubCon and, sit at the front, talk to as many people as you can. If one of the vendors really says something that you like, go and talk to them, get the business card, and follow up afterwards. As long as you always take action, with everything that you learn, you'll always do better every day. So my challenge is to all of you guys, especially the ones who've been here for 5 or more times, seek out people who you can tell for the first time. Tell them some good advice, what really helped you in your career, because we're all here to help each other out. That's why PubCon, in my opinion, is the best conference out there. And plus, Tester would love it if we could follow his footsteps and do that. I think it would be great. People could do a nice random act of kindness. So that's my rant for today. So with that, again, any questions? If you guys get some great tips, please tweet this up because we want everyone else out there to know that this was the session that should have been. They're not right now. All right, with that, what's up, Ben?
Okay. Yeah, I do remember Dexter too. every PubCon I spoke at was always a technical type. I tried to get into the other ones, but they always put me in the technical ones. And that's where Dexter also used to speak of. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about, there's some SEO in it and there's some technical in it. So who are really mainly web developers that know SEO? And who are mainly SEO people that know web development? Okay, so doesn't matter anyway because it's kind of merge your knowledge already. Okay, so going through it, and this is what I'm going to mainly talk about. So when we look at sites today, so many people like to bells and whistles. That's why I have bells and whistles there. And it's not really just creating the bells and whistles just to have bells and whistles. There's a usability part of it. People like it. It's fast, it's interactive. As long as you're using it in the right way, people love using it. And why do people like using all these effects? Because it's fast, it's instantaneous, you see it right away. And sometimes these small movements, it just enhances the user experience. Why do you think even Apple pays so much attention in their devices, even on things shrinking and expanding? Because it helps you, it gives you an idea of where things are going, just these minute movements. But all of that is like extra coding, extra problems, extra issues that we also run into when we do SEO. Okay? So, when we're looking at code, when we're looking at websites, it's not just HTML, obviously. There's lots of things that go into it, okay? And, you have to use images, of course. In some cases, you use videos. Sometimes you use Flash if you want to. CSS and JavaScript, of course. On the server side, there's also some programming languages, Server, there's PHP, there's ASP, because HTML can't really handle any type of data, and that can't be the programming side of it. If you're old school, you might be using some Perl, some Python. Some people might still be using Fusion. JavaScript is more on the, on the front-end side. And passing data along between each other, there are some technologies that use XML, and in some cases JSON, because it's easier to handle arrays better in XML. Now, looking at this, we could kind of split this into client-side and server-side. Now, some of you may be advanced coders there, and this is kind of like an introduction in the beginning of how we're going to look at this so we can evaluate it, how it helps out, or how it causes problems in SEO. So when we talk about client-side and server-side, client-side really runs on your browser. It's running on your computer. When we talk about server-side, these technologies are running on the server. Okay? What's not listed there are databases. There's MySQL, PostgreSQL, MSSQL, or SQL Server, Oracle, and whatnot. All of those will run on the server. Now, you know, the nice thing about client side is, since it's already on your computer, it tends to run fast. And it doesn't reload the page because you have it already in front of you. Whatever you do, it runs instantly. Whenever it's something that runs on the server, you know, it has to refresh, it has to reload. It uses some time, but it's ideal to do things there when you're downloading a large amount of data, if you're accessing a database. Typically, you don't want to do that on the front end because why would you pass along a large amount of data just to process it on the client? You just want to send over information that you need. Okay? So, going into that, where as things develop and users like that fast response, but you also need that large amount of data, but you want to avoid the page reloading, this is when some certain techniques started to come out. And this is for Ajax. More people started using Ajax. And when you use Ajax, what is happening is we mainly deal with HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And on the server side, all of the server-side languages there, we could just bundle up all of that into one. Just call it server-side scripting and databases. So what we're doing here is you get the power of the fast loading of the client side, but you could still pull data on the back end from the server side, and and XML is actually optional, even though the X there in Ajax we use XML in the original acronym, asynchronous JavaScript and XML. It's pretty much optional. You could use it or you could not use it. But what you're doing there is you get that fast loading time, you get that fast response. It kind of makes you feel like you're using a desktop application, which users love. But you have the ability to pull data from the server without the page reloading. Okay? So that is the main, the main importance here. It runs fast, client-side JavaScript, but you have the ability to pull data from the server. Okay? Now, when Ajax came out with the technique, then and things keep on reusing types of code, and people started putting these codes together and creating their own frameworks. And that's what I have there as the example here, jQuery, prototype, UFX, Ext.js, and then there's a lot more. And all of these frameworks, it just made popular several types of effects. There's tab navigation, and let me see if that GIF animation works. Okay, it does work. Okay, so clicking around, there's tabs. There's lots of sites are using that today. Origin navigation. When things expand and contract, click on another area, another thing expands and contracts. Okay. Now, other things. There's parallax scrolling. There's also frameworks for parallax scrolling. I think PubCon, the one that I listed on the heading, is a parallax framework. What that does basically is you're using you can view it as different types of layers that are on top of each other. And whenever you scroll, they run at different speeds or in different directions. It really depends on how creative you want to be. Sometimes if they're running in the same direction, the ones at the back are running faster, and the ones in front are slower. It gives you some feel of like a 3D type of feel. It's not really 3D. It's kind of simulating. Now, many people are starting to use that too. People think it's cool. Okay, I also think it's cool. Sometimes it can cause some issues. Okay. Now, there's also the sliding banners. You see that on many sites today. The main heading where they want to put their main marketing statement, their promo, whatever they're selling, and it just scrolls from side to side. Okay. Light boxes. These are the overlay image that you sometimes use on galleries, sometimes you use for videos, sometimes you can use on any piece of content that just opens up into a separate box that's on top of your page instead of coming up with a pop-up in a separate browser. Okay. Now expand expandable areas. These are just areas that you can click on and expand this different tracks. Okay, so that is text areas that is partially hidden and then partially it comes out. So if we're going to look at all of these, when we look at these effects, depending on who made it, how they made it, it could be running in different ways. You know, when we're talking about client-side only, maybe it relies only on JavaScript, not really pulling any extra data from the server. That means all your content is on a single page. Now, if you use some type of Ajax where you also rely, where some of your content is pulled from the server, some of the content is on the server. It's not really on the browser right away. Okay? So from that alone, you could already have some type of SEO issue. Okay? Now, what could be the issue? If you're going to look at how search engines will actually view the page when they hit it, not all of them will run JavaScript. Google claims that they could already run JavaScript in some way, and they do. They have what they call the headless browser, although we do see some inconsistencies with this on how they actually could crawl the data. But they do claim that they can. But also, Google is not the only search engine in the world, of course. There's other search engines. So going straight into the issues, if you have your content and you're using some of these effects, and it's all client-side powered, and I labeled that number 1 because I'm going to go through, I believe, 6 issues. Okay? One is all the content is on the same page. To kind of visualize that, and here's an example of two links on a page that does not open a new URL, but the content changes. Now, if we look at that in another screenshot where I disabled JavaScript, I disabled CSS, and I disabled images, and just focus on the same area, you could see here in the first one, that content corresponds to the other content on their side. On the article side, that piece of content is the one below it. Now, when you click on it, the URL didn't change, it hashes the content all in a single area. So imagine if you do this on a single site where all their pages are like that, all their pages are tabs. Then the whole website is a single URL. And on each link could be a different topic. It could be a products page, it could be a service page, it could be about us, it could be whatever. But if you put all that content on a single page, you're diluting the focus of what that page is all about. You want pages that are solely about a single topic and not diluting it with multiple words of multiple topics. That make sense? Okay. So that is already one issue. And I just added a tip there. If you want to view your sites with disabled JavaScript images and CSS, you could use the web developer toolbar. There's some drop downs there where you can disable all of them, or you can simply use Google Cache and go to text only. You'll kind of get the same effect. Okay. So, what is the solution? Some people, some SEO people that doesn't know the solution, they'll say, just don't do that. Just don't do that. Create separate pages. But I crossed it out because I don't like doing that. I like a challenge. I like coming up with a solution. So one of the solutions I propose is do it with Ajax. And how you're going to do it is every piece of content will have their own individual page that is not loaded by Ajax. But all the other effects that you click on is loaded by Ajax. And probably this will make more sense later on if this is going to, I assume it is, I can open up a browser just to show one example that sums everything up at the end. And I'll show how that works. But if you could imagine, you have multiple tabs. When you click on them, the URL will change, your content changes, but the first initial content is static HTML. And for your other pages, it would have a different default content. But every time you click on a new link, it doesn't change. It's all Ajax. But in the either search engines, it's going to crawl the normal links, and it's going to see those individual pages. It may not sound that clear right now, but when I show the example later, I think it's going to be clearer. Hashbagging, the hashtag with the exclamation point. And this is was a rule that Google specifically came out when they first came out with the headless browser. They said if you want to trigger the headless browser, you could pass parameters in the URL using the pound symbol and add an exclamation point after it. And that would trigger the this browser, which is a browser without a user interface that Google runs. Meaning it downloads your site, it runs it as it's a browser, so it runs JavaScript as it's supposed to be. It looks at your content before it analyzes it. Now, thing is, I'm not a fan of it, and obviously also not all search engines use it, only Google does. So that is why my preferred solution is using the Ajax solution. And I'll show you later that example. Now, if your content is running, has some content on the server, and you also have client-side JavaScript, and you're playing around with CSS by appearing things, disappearing things, in that GIF animation there, you can see there's some scrolling options that you could change on here, and some of the images like appear and disappear. But the source code may be too small, but there are a bunch of script tags. And all of the content is not there at all. So when search engines look at a page like this, it doesn't see any content at all. So nothing is there. It won't rank for anything. So again, what's my solution for that? Okay. Same thing. Some people say don't do this, but I don't do that. I say if you really want the effect, then use the effect. You could use the same solution as the one previously, but instead of hiding everything in Ajax, you want to show that default single content for a specific page. Again, it's going to look clearer later on when I show an example. And you could apply this in many ways. You could apply it on tab navigation, you could apply it on Parallax scrolling, you could apply it on almost anything. And okay, each URL has its own HTML default content, the rest is loaded by Ajax. Okay, links that cannot be crawled. Sometimes if you're playing around with CSS, you're playing around with JavaScript, and you have some type of effect, something disappears, collapses, expands, accordion nav, whatever, you're relying on JavaScript to control that CSS part. And sometimes you use JavaScript so much that your anchor tags could look like this. The href goes nowhere. You have an on-click going to some custom function you created, and all of that is designed where you click on it, it doesn't reload the new page. Now what I do suggest is do this instead. Your href value should be an actual URL. And what happens here is when people click on it, since the return false is included on the on-click event, it won't reload the page. It won't actually even load the value in href. It will just run whatever function you have there. Okay? So you have the user experience there. You're pleasing them with all the bells and whistles that you want. But for search engines, they're going to look at that href value. They're going to crawl to that page. They're going to go to that page. And that page will have the content that's really needed for search engines. Okay? So basically what we want here is your href should always have a valid URL as a value. And this is for your search engines mainly. It's not mainly for the users. Add the return false, add whatever function, and continue with all the effects you want to use. What is not on this slide, if you really want to have some type of effect that's not really a link, you really don't want to control, then don't even use an link tag. Just use a span tag or a div or what, and you can still add the on-click function. But sometimes people don't, or it's clickable because the cursor doesn't change into the hand. It's still the crosshairs or the text selection cursor. But you could also control that by CSS using, I think, cursor pointer or cursor hand or pointer cursor. It's one of those CSS. Okay. So another problem is links that cannot be seen. Why? Because it's loaded by Ajax. It's not really loaded in the beginning. But the solution here is the same as the two solutions that I mentioned in the issues earlier. As long as the initial content for the specific page loads as plain HTML, then the content will be seen. And the links within it will be seen also. Incorrect URLs that people will link to. Okay, so the main issue here is if ever you have Ajax content and you're clicking around, the URL doesn't change. But if a person wants to link to you because of the content that changed, and you link to it, when a person visits that link, they wouldn't see the same content. They would see the beginning content that it goes to. Okay? Because the URL never changed at all. So you could be people could be linking to you for the wrong relevancy of wherever the link is coming from. So one suggestion there is to use the push state method. And the push state method is basically you could change the URL within the browser, but it does not reload the page. And it even solves issues with your back and forward button. Now this is mainly for newer browsers. For older browsers, you have to play with some other techniques. But for now, you could just use push state, and if it doesn't work, then just let it be. It's not a critical thing that you have to place in the older browser. Okay. So basically, use push state solution, and it is not a solution for everything. Just because you're using it, it will correctly the issues. Of course, the URL that you load should load a specific page, and that ties up with the two issues mentioned earlier. Now, for the last part, if you're using some type of effect, fortune nav, scrollable, parallax scrolling, tag navigation or what, and you want to track it in analytics because you want to see what type of content people are reading, but when they're clicking on it, it's not requiring the analytics code again, then you might be getting false reports. You don't really know what the user is doing on your page. So for Google Analytics, they have event tracking, they have virtual page views. So you have to make sure that you configure this properly. Okay? For other web analytics platforms, I'm not 100% familiar with, then know the equivalent of how to do that event tracking and virtual page views. Okay. And for Google Analytics, my tip there is if you go to Google Analytics under the research help section, under Analytics IQ, they have a nice video about event tracking and virtual page views. Now, here is an example, and hopefully this is connected. It does open the browser. And let's see if it works. Now, what I wanted to do before the conference is come up with an example for everything, for parallax scrolling, tab browsing, everything, but the presentation I just finished this morning, just uploaded. So even the example, obviously I wasn't able to finish, but I do have one that is bold that I've been using in the past. I was planning on using client sites, but I wasn't able to ask permission from all our clients. And sometimes some are happy that we mentioned them, some don't want to be mentioned at all. So just to be safe, I'm just using an old example. So this site is what you see here. If I click on the link, nice. It's not even where there it is. You can see the content changing, but you can see the URL is not changing because basically it's using Ajax. Okay. Now, what is the URL here? If I right-click on this and I open it on the link, you see that it has its own URL and it has its own content. But when I start clicking on the links again, the page does not reload. It stays there. So you have hard links in here. But when I click on them, they're not fired because Ajax is firing. Okay? So from a search engine standpoint, what does a search engine see? What a search engine sees for this home page, if I view the source, content is not there at all. Now when I look for the content for the products page, where this is the products, and I look for content, and you'll see content is products, and the other content is not there at all. It's only for the products. But the Ajax experience are not changing even if the content is changing. So, if I do a site command here, just to see, what does Google actually see? Does it see this as individual pages? And still loading. It will see each individual page with its own corresponding content, and it's not diluted with all the other rest of the content. So it's basically you have the same links and you have the same completed content that search engines see, but from the experience of the user, that's the only time that the Ajax affects statement. And this could be done in various ways. This could be done as parallax scrolling. As you scroll, it starts to load the rest. And what as Google called it is going to be loaded a while. Still loading. So while that is loading, just going back to a summary of everything, and we can go back to that I'll have. So users love dynamic content, okay? And that gave rise to various using Ajax. And those techniques, came up with various frameworks. And that increase of frameworks caused, problems in SEO, either diluting the content or your content cannot be seen. The links are not full, or the links cannot be seen, or users are linking to the wrong URLs. So to fix that, you have to use Ajax properly, and I tried to explain it in 2 bullet points, and I tried to show an example. Probably that's not sufficient to grasp right away how to actually code it. And you can look at the example and look deeper into it. You'll get a better feel of how to actually do it. You have to link your pages properly and making sure that the URL is the actual URL of the content when people share it. Then people will be linking. And that is the end. Now let's just see the site command, and you can see here in the site command all the pages are indexed properly for that example. And when you look at it, you look at the cached version, you'll see that it is also the right content. It's not mixed with any other content. And that ends it.